Welcome to the Zachrilege Cast podcast, YouTube video interview program that features me talking to some of the best and brightest in the atheist slash secular slash awesome community. This is episode 46, and we're recording live on February 4th, 2016. I would like to thank Robert and Amy of Secular Yakking for being on last week, and I hope you feel better, Amy. So Amber Geiselinger is the guest tonight. She is an atheist, teacher, blogger, and badass. She started Belles of Atheism, available at your local YouTube as a way to demystify atheism in the American South, and that's not the Canadian South. Y'all hosers are on your own. It's not just an atheist show, as she will talk about women's issues, current events, and the whimsical. And she will drink very good beer while doing it. So welcome to the show, Amber.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Should we do a beer introduction? Because, I always bring my beer, but I feel like you took it to the next level, as it were.
Yeah, you first.
I have my Game of Thrones mug, and I'm drinking Cabin Fever from New Holland, which is quite good. And then in case things get a little crazy, I go Death by Coconut from Oscar Blues, which is like Almond Joy in a can. It's really, really good. But anyway, I hear you have your own.
Yes, I do. My husband and I, we homebrew. And so this is an oatmeal stout. And one of our first dates, he taught me how to homebrew. And we've developed this recipe over about 7 years. It's peanut butter, chocolate, oatmeal stout. And of course, a stout's a dark beer. So if you guys can see it, there it is.
I know I just big fan of the dark beer. I was doing a show last night with a friend of mine who was really into IPAs, and he started with an IPA and then he moved his way to like a pumpkin beer by the end.
I do like pumpkin beer. I know everyone says they're basic, but I do like pumpkin beer.
Yeah, this is one out of Houston from a place called St. Arnold's, and he sent me a few before. And generally speaking, pumpkin beers, and really, I've only had one beer that's done the peanut butter and chocolate. Terrapin, which is at Athens, about an hour from here, they do one that's pretty good. And I've heard there's one out of, I think it's Baltimore, and I think it's called Baby Jesus or something. So I might have to, I got to get my beer crew rolling, but that's a totally different subject and different show, but it's a nice way to get started to know you're a little relaxed here. So can you talk about kind of your own, I guess, religious background, since you are from the South and you've spent a lot of time in the South?
Yeah, I have spent a lot of time in the South. Well, I guess I was born in Alabama, and shortly after my parents moved to Ohio, where they had my sister. And then after I started kindergarten, they moved to Tennessee. So I spent a lot of my childhood in Tennessee, which I really love that state. And I still, when I think it's childhood, I spent time in the foothills, the Smoky Mountains. So I do have a love for Gatlinburg and Knoxville, where I live, Knoxville. And I really, I miss it at times. There's lots of lightning bugs there. And so Tennessee was my first place I really felt at home. And then we moved when I was in, I guess about in middle school, my parents moved back to Alabama, which was not a good thing overall, where I went to Catholic school. And my sister and I, we were primarily raised Catholic, and well, I guess only raised Catholic. We did go to private school pretty much in Alabama. And I danced ballet, for quite a number of years. So I'm a classically trained dancer. I guess you could say I had a classical education to some extent, being in parochial schools. However, it was not all, it was supposedly better than the public schools, but I'll just shorten it by saying that the Catholic high school that I was in, St. Bernard Preparatory up here in Coleman County, Coleman's about an hour away from Birmingham. The year that I actually left high school 2 years early because there was a scandal at that Catholic high school where there were molestation charges and rape charges from that brought about by parents and students. And I was one of the students that was called in by the police department and the DHR as a witness to these allegations and crimes. So after that, you can imagine I left. I left high school when what would have been starting my junior year, what would have been my junior year, I started college. I went back to Tennessee and started college in Chattanooga. So that sort of is a little bit about my background in Catholic school. And as far as growing up, I did see a lot of things that you hear about within Catholic culture and the Catholic community, which will bring us into the forced adoptions that we'll talk about. Not a good thing to grow up if you're female. But it's better than being in the third world, and it's better than being a Muslim. So, and I have to be honest about that. So I'm thankful for that. If you're stacking it against that, I basically went to college. My first degree is in public policy. It's a pre-law degree. I was going to go to law school, but I decided to go to grad school and become a teacher. I'm an English teacher. And that's pretty much the nutshell version. I've had a lot of weird experiences in my life. I've traveled a bit, been married before and seen some odd things. So there you go.
Seen some odd things back in the South. Yeah, I lived in Nashville like through middle school, and my parents live there now. My wife's family lives outside of Chattanooga, so similar circles.
Yeah, we probably do know some similar people. I bet we have some acquaintances between you being in Atlanta, me being in Birmingham, and Chattanooga connection. We have to know some of the same people. So.
Exactly. Yeah, and try to get up to like that Pigeon Forge area for the every other year Tennessee Missouri football game. It's a whole family gathering there, so that's nice.
Yeah, go Vols.
There you go. Go Vols. But we're in Alabama. That's okay. That's all right.
Yeah.
There are other things bet you are behind that maybe a lot of Alabama people might not like. So,
oh yeah.
What made you decide to get started and do your own show? Get like started.
Several variables. There was a kind of, I guess it started with the question of why are there not a lot of at least outspoken female atheists, women atheists? And I thought that needed to be addressed, and kind of got my answer. But I also felt that discrimination about atheists in the South, primarily toward atheists, is a thing, a very real thing. And I've felt that and seen that. And my husband and I both have. So there was definitely a need for it. And also a lot of the things that we do see here that what I would say are violations of human rights that still happen in Alabama. And I want to talk about that. But also I did want to just sort of have kind of an open cafe, sort of a place where, I could talk to people and meet people and talk about literature that I love. And like I said, the whimsical, and I've talked to all kinds of people, even a paranormal investigator who's a really good friend of mine, who's been involved with all those shows that you used to be on TV and stuff. So it's been a lot of fun. And I talked to a professor friend of mine who's a colleague, who he's a Lovecraft scholar. For those of you who like Lovecraft, H.P. Lovecraft, it's just been really interesting, and I hope to bring on some more physicists in the future, because my husband's a physicist, so I hope to bring some of the more science guys on. So that was a large part of it. I didn't want to have a YouTube channel to be like a reporter or because I'm not a communications major. I didn't want to interview people necessarily like the traditional interview type. I just sort of wanted to just have it be fun, like an open cafe. And I think that's what Google Hangouts is sort of all about. But what really pushed me to do it, I think, was a lot of, I wanted to do it a year or so ago and really talk about atheism and really touch on that topic for this area. But I have a couple friends who found me on YouTube after I tweeted out, why are there so few female atheists when women, religion is so horrible to women in particular, why would more women not be atheists? And I tweeted that out. And a friend of mine, Twitter buddy, found me, Dan Simpson, and he runs Atheism Chat. And then Andy found me, who is a contributor to Atheism Chat. And Andy has the Andy O'Brien Show of Inflame Media. And back then, Andy, and who Lalo now is a big deal online, but back then he wasn't as well known, Lalo DeGosh. And of course, this was back then, this was just last year. But Lalo DeGosh and Andy O'Brien had the LA show before Lalo went on and did his own thing. And they asked me to be on their show just one night. I got a text last minute where they just wanted me to be on their show. And I had never heard of Google Hangouts. I didn't know what the hell this was. And, but I had been big in atheism chat and everyone really liked me. And I seemed to get like a lot of everyone, I kind of brought a sense of decorum in the sense of people being nice to one another and just not always arguing illogically to the format. And that was one thing that, if I was going to be a part of it, people were going to mind their manners and actually have a discussion and not get their panties in wad. So I think that kind of intrigued some people. And so when Andy and Lalo, they asked me to be on their show, I didn't know that it was like a show, apparently it was kind of what they talk about, big issues and stuff, controversial things. And I didn't know. I thought it was just going to be about atheism and friends. So I was real giddy about it. I was like, my friends want to talk to me, my internet friends. So I said yes. And it was just on their show. And then from there, it just kind of went. And then they both encouraged me. And Lalo gave me like a 4-hour talk about, what to do and what not to do. But make sure you talk to people before you put them on. You talk to them on live hangout, and never give anyone your personal information. It felt like he was my dad, like telling me all this stuff. And then Andy, when I did my first show, Andy had to stay on and help me with it because I didn't know what I was doing. So basically he had the password and he was helping me do everything. And he was in Ireland and I was in Alabama. So it was really interesting. And I had a friend of mine on too, Ann Wells. She's a local model and actress. I had her on the first episode too. And it's a really funny episode. It's so disjointed. I don't know. But it's just what we were doing. It's just a hangout, just, being friends and just talking about stuff. So yeah, there you go.
But now you're a professional, right?
I don't know about that.
Or you're like a wily veteran. You know what's happening.
Yeah. Much better than what I was first episode. Like I didn't even know if I was live, or I hate to say episode because it makes it sound like a show. I just call it a channel because I really don't put myself in the same category as the rest of y'all because I don't really have a sense of, I have a sense of purpose, but as far as direction, that was just the direction. Everything I said, everything I wanted to tackle and cover. So.
Well, what happened to the other Belles? Wasn't there another Belle in the picture you have on your page?
She's a nurse here in Birmingham, and she's worried about losing her job. She works at a hospital, and some of the issues are getting controversial, especially with the local, adoption trafficking, the human rights violation that's about to come down that the state of Alabama has been called out for by the Huffington Post, as well as, the Daily Mail in the UK. So there's a lot of stuff that's about to come out about the whole adoption trafficking. And also she didn't want really to be associated, even though she didn't use her last name, like I used my last name. She didn't want to be associated because she was afraid if it got back to work. There were a lot of variables, and she may still come back on and do some things, but she's only going to do like the shows that are kind of whimsical, where we talk about books or wine pairings, wine tastings, stuff like that. And that's the same thing kind of with Anne too. It's like she has to be careful because she has kids. So there's a very real need for a cafe, a live hangout like this to show that women here are really scared of speaking out because, they're afraid of the backlash. Anne's afraid that, someone from one of her ex's family will see her and, try to challenge. There's a lot of fear because this is still, being an atheist is still threatening to your job, your family, a lot of variables here that, you may not have to take into account if you're in a bigger city like Atlanta or somewhere like Seattle or Portland or California, New York, but you do have to take it into account here in Alabama. So that's why you don't see them on as much as I would like for them to be on, and that's a big part of it.
Yeah, I don't blame people. I know there's some people who are like, you have to be out. It's like you have to know your own level of safety and comfort.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm still kind of semi out. Like everyone, like someone will actually, because I am using my real name, will tag me on Facebook, and it used to be like, oh crap, I need to untag, and then it's like, this is Facebook. Let's see.
Yeah.
Because the majority of people I follow, they're either friends from a long, long time ago or mostly atheists I met in the past few years. So most people who see that are like, oh, well, that's not anything too crazy. So are people who are like just getting into your show, is there a, like, do you go in chronological order, or do you have like a show where you're like, oh, this is the one you should listen to if you're getting started?
I guess I should probably start numbering them, but I've never thought to do that because I was just kind of seeing what was going to happen. I just really wanted to really have a conversation about atheism in the South and female atheist and everything I'm talking about, and then bring in a lot of art and literature and stuff. So I guess I have started referencing shows. I think my favorite was probably, well, two favorites. The one I did with my professor friend, Leverett Butts, who's a Lovecraft scholar, and also Valerie Baber. And Valerie's something of a celebrity, and she is really cool. She's a sex therapist, model, actress. She worked as a companion escort for a while, has a lot of real world experience. She's a very grounded person, very smart, so much education. She has 2 or 3 degrees. She's just an incredible person. So I would say those were probably the 2 best episodes that I think that I really like of mine.
And who is that in your lap, and who's that behind you? You got a couple cats involved.
Oh, this is Morgan. This is my cat Morgan in my lap. She's a long-haired tortoiseshell. And then that over there is Hypatia sitting in the chair. There'll be more. I have 6 cats total.
Impressive. I just got 2, and they don't dig the show. So we had
Really?
two cats we lost in the past year, and they would just like get in your lap, and they'd be like, hey, they'd talk to you. But these 2, no, they're kittens. They're still young. They don't know what's happening. I just figured, cat people stick together. But do you have for your show like a dream guest or someone you'd really like to talk to, whether it's a well-known person or just someone you want to have a chat with?
No, I've never really even thought of it as that. I mean, not really. I can't imagine. Gosh, I can't think of anybody. I guess I'd like to interview currently. I'd like to interview, I don't mean to say it like that. If I could talk to anybody or visit with anybody on my channel, I guess I would like to visit with Terry Brooks, the author of the Shannara series, because they just recently made a TV show out of that on MTV, and I grew up reading those books. And that's my favorite fantasy epic, the Shannara series. So I'd probably want to talk to him. Probably, or another author that I admire, like someone like Alice Hoffman would be really cool. Or I would kind of like to talk to, I don't know, maybe a ballerina or something. See, the guys who watch the show would be like, why is she saying that? But yeah, so I guess someone like that. And I guess if I had to pick someone from the atheist community, I guess it would be cool to talk to Ayaan Hirsi Ali, because I admire her. It'd be really cool to talk to her. So yeah, there you go.
Good to know. It's like it's time to readjust, huh?
Yeah.
Let me throw a little introduction before we get to the next question here. When I decided that the label atheist fit me, like my back would come up and I'd get really defensive anytime I'd hear the term atheist or someone would impugn the term.
Yeah.
But over time, I learned that sometimes the impugning was deserved. And also consider myself a feminist. And when that term gets Nazified, I automatically get that metallic taste in my mouth. And I know you don't like these terms, but I had to throw them out. So when it comes to feminism, what was the original concept behind intersectionalism, and what horrible Frankenstein monster has it become?
Well, I technically have never been an intersectionalist, but from what I understand and from what I have learned in college, intersectionalism was all these different things, these isms coming together for feminism to tackle, bringing in women of different backgrounds, different income levels, bringing everyone together. Basically, it was to break down the class structure and the race structure to make feminism relevant, to say someone in Mexico, to bring everyone into the conversation, which sounds really great. So it was kind of an intersectionality, as I understand the very original. But then that sort of got hijacked by the whole gender studies thing. And the gender studies thing kind of took it to a different level, to where they got into more theory instead of actually doing things, actually doing activism, reforming, rewriting laws, proposing policy. It became, instead of doing all that, it became more just theory-based. And that's where you get these first world social issues, where we care more about, did someone look at me cross-eyed or not? Then we care about things that are very real violations of human rights, such as adoption, trafficking, which happens in this country. So my issue with the Frankenstein that the intersectionals have done to feminism, it is no longer the feminism that was, or what I remember from decades ago, from my mom even calling herself being considered feminist. It has become a Frankenstein. They care more about social, what we're calling now online, social justice warrior issues. For example, we've all heard of Gamergate. We've all heard of Elevatorgate. We've all heard of Shirtgate. And which really irritated me, that one, because, okay, there's an astrophysicist, Matt Taylor, who lands a probe on a comet. That's epic, historically epic. It's a major deal. The first time in human history, the first time that we know of in the universe, okay? And what do these people, these intersectional social justice warriors do? They bitch about him wearing a bowler shirt with pinups, space-themed pinups on it. That's what they bitch about. Instead of celebrating this moment, this feat in human history, they completely shit on it. Okay, now this shirt was made by his best friend who's female, and she sells those shirts on Etsy. So this is why, and even the Washington Post interviewed or did a write-up about Ayaan Hirsi Ali. Ayaan Hirsi Ali commented on this issue when asked about it, and she basically ripped him a new butthole, an intersectionalist. This brand of female, or this brand of Western feminism, I should say. She basically called him out for caring about trivial bullshit instead of human rights violations, human rights issues. When they want to focus on a shirt rather than talk about the fact that 12 million girls and women globally have been victims of female genital mutilation. When they want to talk about video games instead of talking about rape gangs in India and the acid attacks, when they want to talk about, if they truly want to talk about rape culture, then they need to stop focusing on getting asked for coffee in elevators. They really need to focus on rape culture. There's a lot of trivial bullshit that has basically come out of intersectionalism. And a lot of it is aimed at policing people, policing language, instead of policing the things that people actually do to hurt each other. They don't seem to care much about global issues, and they've hijacked the movement so much that really, I don't even think that any of us should refer to it as feminism. They really have their own movement. And it is intersectionality or intersectionalism, whichever one. And I don't think that, granted, they're still going to use the term feminist, but they don't deserve to, because the feminist movement is no longer about women's rights. It is about all these first world problems that have nothing to do with human rights violations. And that is a shame. What they have done is a shame. And not only did they make feminism a Frankenstein, what they've done to it, but they made their own boogeyman. As Lalo said to me once, he's like, I really think this whole men's rights stuff is a feminist boogeyman. They made their own devil, because by behaving that way and being ugly, and yeah, if you go and you look at a lot of things they've said and they've done, and I don't want to give credence to them by listing any names, but on my podcast with Reese, he was listing some of the things. And the behavior is very much what they would ascribe to the patriarchy, especially this shaming women online and trying to kick women out of the feminist movement and saying, well, you can't be a feminist and you can't have your own brand of feminism, and second wave is dead and it's ours now. And the ugly things that they've said, especially what they did to me in graduate school and undergrad, just because I wouldn't agree with them. And a lot of it was because I wasn't a man hater, and I'm just going to be frank about that. And I hate to say it, but they call, well, no, I don't hate to say it because it's true. They caused the whole men's right, that whole vicious movement, the whole women hating movement, that misogyny that came out of the last 10 years by their behavior, and the fact that the feminism, because of the third wave is the same thing as intersectionality. They basically caused their own backlash, and now we have that to deal with as well. So hate causes hate, and they'll claim that the third wavers will claim that they don't hate men, but their actions and the way they behave say otherwise, and some of the things they say and they do. And I don't even really think that they really care for women either, because if they really cared for women, they would care for some of the things that I'm addressing. And I haven't, such as domestic violence rates here in the South. They're very high comparatively to other parts of the country, and they don't seem to address that. They don't really, there's so many things that they just don't seem to care about, but they'll bitch about a shirt. Sorry, that was an essay answer.
No, that's why we're here. But you mentioned your own personal experience. You talked about it on last episode of your show.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened to you when you were in grad school, and the reaction you got from certain feminists to, a personal situation you were having?
Well, I've actually had several. I had some in undergrad too. I almost got booted out of the women's studies minor in undergrad in a class because I raised my hand. I said, you can't blame everything on men. You really do have to take some of the responsibility and look at the way that women treat other women. Because women do, there are such thing. There are female misogynists. There are female patriarchs. That is a very real thing. I went to Catholic school. I know how horrible they are. And I know what they do. And a lot of the people who are forcing adoptions are female. You can't go around blaming that on men. And as one of my fellow activist reformers, Celeste Billshart, says, if war is man's inhumanity to man, then adoption is woman's inhumanity to woman. And I think that is so very true. And all these things that I'd seen in childhood, and all these, all the ugliness and the backbiting and the passive aggressiveness that you do see in female relationships and girl on girl violence, no one wanted to talk about that. And when I brought that up, I was threatened that I was going to be kicked out of the class. When I said, you just can't always blame men, women hurt men too. So that was one of the first things I saw. And in graduate school, there was more that happened in undergrad. And really, this was when intersectionalism, whatever, was really becoming a big thing. It was really becoming a big thing. The third wave really kind of, it started in the 1990s and really took hold, I guess, in the 2000s. So, and I was in graduate school in 2007, and the previous year, 2 years in graduate school, I basically had gotten out of a really bad marriage, and that was really, really toxic and really horrible. and it took me a while to get out, and it was a very bad situation. And I remember I would be at home and not feel safe, and there was one, and everything was threatened around me because my ex has a really bad temper, really volatile, and for no reason, like anything will set him off. And I was dealing with a lot of that at home, a lot of physical stuff at home. And then I would have to go to graduate school, and these people who were supposed to be so pro-woman, I couldn't even open up and tell them because of the way I looked and the way I dressed and the way I didn't come to school in pajamas. I shaved under my arms. I smelled well. I washed my hair, wore makeup. I mean, that knee-jerk reaction to the fact that I didn't look like a bum and the way they treated me, when they had no idea what was going on. And also the fact that I really didn't get involved in the organizations because it was so horrible at home that I just wanted to be a teacher, and I was just doing my thing. And like I told on my podcast, one of the things that happened, and you would think that people wouldn't behave this way in graduate school, but they do. I was walking down the hall wearing skinny jeans and boots over the tall boots, because I've always been, you know, very on par with style and stuff. I've always been very well put together. That's just how I was raised, to always be very well put together. You know, I dance ballet. It's just something that you just do no matter what I've always done. It's always been classy. And I remember walking in and these feminist third wavers pointing and laughing at me, and basically they would follow me down the hall. And this just didn't happen once. It happened, but this particular time they were like laughing because I was wearing skinny jeans, because they'd never seen skinny jeans before, because I was one of the first people to wear them in the state of Alabama. And I just and this happened a lot where they would. It was really creepy, because if can you imagine if a group of men had been doing this to me? If a group of men had been following me around doing this, they would have been called on the carpet. But because these were feminist flying under that label, you know, they followed me around, they called me names, they made threats, they just did a lot of weird shit. And I really didn't say anything back. I did report it. I reported it to the dean's office. I reported it to the English department. I filed a complaint. It ended up with me almost suing. It got so bad. A professor got involved. I almost sued the university, all because, and the thing is, I never had it out with them. I never did anything to them. I never had a big political disagreement with them. Nothing like that happened. Nothing like that happened. But I started to notice that it wasn't just me. I was the heart of it. I was the root of it. They probably sensed that I was an easy target, because I was in a situation at home that they didn't know about that, but they could smell that on me. They could smell that there was a timidness there that they could take advantage of. And they behaved just like they would say patriarchal men behaved. But I did notice that any woman who was any girl who was feminine, anyone who was fit any code of being like a feminine woman, a very gender feminine woman, a very well put together, very attractive. Anyone who was attractive, period, they were that way too. I just got it worse, I think, because I sort of had a very timid. I gave off a timid vibe because of what I was experiencing at home. So I guess that's a couple of counts.
Well, I'm sorry that happened to you, and it doesn't seem like you're timid anymore, but
no,
you hang out talking.
And that's part of the reason I'm not going to let them have that term, because I know there's a very real need for feminism. And I'd be stupid to say that I wasn't a feminist. Like Maya Angelou says, that'd be like saying that you're not on your own side. Everyone's a feminist. If you believe girls should be educated, you're a feminist. Feminism, the original point of feminism was for women's rights to actually be recognized as human rights, for women not to be disenfranchised or marginalized, for women to get the vote, for women to be recognized as autonomous human beings, to have reproductive rights, to have control over our bodies. And I really think if they hadn't have hijacked that movement, I do think, and I've said this before, I do think feminism would have been successful. I do think that we would have seen more of a global shift. And I do, because there is a need for it. There's a need for it in India. There's a need for it in Pakistan. There's a need for it here. There's a need for it in Africa. There's a need for it in Saudi Arabia, everywhere. But, you know, it's a movement that has been, it has really been hijacked. And part of it has been turned into a Frankenstein.
Well, I'm glad you're around to be able to kind of talk about it. And it's almost like when you talk about feminists and certain atheists and the way they act with kind of this atheism plus new everybody trying to come up with a new term. Yeah, it usually means we're going to come up with this very narrow definition, and if you don't agree, then you're out of the club. And it's like, I didn't even know I was in a club. That was the point, was I'm not in the club that most people are in, and now all of a sudden I'm in a new club, and it's a little Animal Farm-ish, like, oh, we got rid of the bad overseers, and now we're just going to create the exact same system for us, and that's not something you want. But how did adoption become like a cause for you?
Well, it's something my husband and I both witnessed growing up, because we grew up Catholic. And his family used to foster girls who were pregnant, and they were part of the Catholic Charities fostering system. And of course, These girls were made to give over their babies. He saw a lot of that growing up. And it happened to my cousin. It happened to my god sister's natural mother, her real mother. It happened to her mom. And it's happened to everyone that has been around this culture. And the same thing in Mormons too. It happens in the Mormon church all the time. They claim it doesn't because the way the Mormon church and the Catholic church handle it now, the adoptions technically don't go through Catholic charities anymore. They use private attorneys, but they're still adopting out. They just use private agencies. What they do, they sort of navigate through a private agency so they don't get a bad name, but everyone knows what they're doing. And they had these, before they used to have homes back in the mid-century, maternity homes, and they had state maternity homes too, because it became a big business, very lucrative. And Kansas City was actually the adoption town. It was the adoption mill town for the United States. And at one time they had something like 12 or 14 homes in Kansas City where they would just turn these women out after they had the baby. And a lot of times, what we've all heard in the news, what happened in Australia, how they used to tie women down to gurneys and shit. They did the same thing here in the United States. And that happened on a wide scale back in the 1950s through up into the maybe the early 80s. And then it became private foster homes through charities like Catholic charities. So every Christian sect has done this pretty much. It's just not Catholics. It's very much in the Mormons. That's why if you look at Utah, their state laws are really fucked up too regarding adoption. And it is a form of human trafficking, because what is the definition of human trafficking? Whenever you buy human life, money is exchanged for human life. So it is, and there is very much there. The reason now, especially seeing it from the inside of the reformist activist world, there is very much, I can definitely see how a lot of the pro-birth people, the pro-life people, they push for adoption, because a lot of these people are actually agencies and adoption attorneys that are writing these laws, the adoption laws, and you, for instance, a white baby today can especially a boy white baby can go for $35,000, and that is a profit that just the attorney will take away. And yes, there are some places we can find this, but you're gonna have to dig for it. And I have a couple sites that I can read off up on my computer right now. If anyone wants a couple sites to go to, it's gone up because of inflation. White children tend to go for more than black children, and actually, I think it was NPR did an article on that recently. CBS actually has an article out now that you can Google that's entitled "Why It Costs More to Adopt a White Baby." So in an age where single motherhood is now accepted and we have abortion and birth control, they're really going to insidious means to acquire newborns. And Alabama is one of 2 states that has what's called an explicit pre-birth consent. Now, what's a pre-birth consent? A pre-birth consent is basically a relinquishment of the fetus growing inside a woman. Now, that sounds like an oxymoron, like you wouldn't be able to relinquish a fetus, right? Because it's not a person. But because the way law is written, it actually is. And now, women are not, girls, women are not told this at all. They're not told this. They're told, and of course, you have to be able to read legalese or be very educated to understand, to read it on your own. They're basically given this contract and told that it's preliminary, it's a consideration, and it's just the first step. It's just a consideration. They're actually not told at that time where they sign in front of a judge that if they change their mind anytime during the pregnancy through the allotted time, which is only 5 days after birth, that judge can overrule. He can claim that he was signing in their betterment and the mother's best interest as well as the child. They're not told this, and it's in the clause, and we can pull up Alabama state law right now and I can show you. So that, granted, most people won't want to read it because it's boring.
Alabama state law has to be kind of frightening, because you mentioned abortion, and that's not an angle that I'd even consider, the fact that this is almost an industry, and then they're kind of shuttling babies to
it is an
Christian
industry.
homes, which is
It is an
gotta
industry.
be big.
It is
money. I mean,
it just in the United States alone, it is about a $14 billion industry. Okay, it is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Now, tell me how this is not human trafficking. These people are predators. They are going after impoverished, disenfranchised, marginalized, single, underage, and or even poor married women. They women who have multiple children have fallen victim. And it is a nightmare. They, like I said before we start the podcast, they're lurking in Medicaid offices. They are in hospitals. They are in schools. They go into schools. These attorneys, the one that is actually over the agency that took the baby that I sent you the article of, and for everyone listening, if you follow me, you've seen me tweet out about hashtag bring baby Elliot home. The big story now that broke last year was about Elliot Rosler, a newborn, 3 weeks old. The sheriffs took him off his mother's boob because she never signed any adoption papers. It was just that what she thought was a preliminary. And the only reason she considered it is because at the time she was with her abusive ex who threatened her life and wanted her to get an abortion. And she thought that he was going to kill her child. Well, by the time she had her baby, they were broken up, and she'd already said no, and she'd dropped contact and all that with these people, the agency and the wannabe person who adopted the baby. Now, who did the baby go to? And if you read the Huffington Post article, it's called the wrongful adoption, adoption part 1 and 2. The baby ended up going to, now this is hypocritical, to a wealthy single white woman who has some curious quirks. So this baby, this white boy, didn't even go to a couple. So it's interesting when money is involved, suddenly anything goes. The attorney, the CEO, the main attorney that founded the agency that took advantage of Kimberly Rosler and her son Elliot, Kimberly, the mother of Elliot, was founded and is still ran by Donna Imes, who people in this state, everyone out there that doesn't know, Google Georgia Tan with 2 T's. In the early 20th century, she was the adoption expert who was really a serial killer, a pedophile. She ended up kidnapping thousands of children. She would take them off of playgrounds. She would go to medical wards, take out sick children. The best write-up on Georgia Tan was actually by the Daily Mail, I think, in the UK. And then there's a book on Amazon. And she was so infamous in her day that it took years for everything she did to come out because she had so many friends in high places. So she was charismatic and knew how to say the right things back when America was a really conservative, more conservative nation than what it is today, that she was even friends with the Roosevelts at the time. So, and also she's the one, if you've heard Joan Crawford, her children, she's the one who adopted Georgia Tan is basically famous for adopting children to all the wealthy people in Hollywood when they were adopting children in Hollywood. So she's the one that basically found Joan Crawford. Yeah, it was Joan Crawford, her children. And so there's a whole history there. But I brought up Georgia Tan because everyone in this state knows that this has been going on for a while. It's just these adoption attorneys are the ones that are writing the laws and passing them in our state house. And how are they doing that? Well, judges are elected, right? Because we elect judges, so that means money. And a lot of these attorneys contribute or they're on the judge's campaign. And it's interesting because the judges who are involved in this Elliott case and Kimberly Rosler's case have all been affiliated and or on the board of Adoption Rocks. And she has contributed or worked on their campaigns.
So Adoption Rocks is the adoption agency?
Yeah, it's the adoption agency. And sorry if I seemed a little bit scattered, but there's so much.
By the way, I'm going to be throwing a lot of links in the show notes. So if there's anything you think you missed, please check that out, and you'll
Yeah.
get some more detail about a lot of this. Because like you in a 2-minute period basically mentioned like 7 things that could have been a show. So it's a lot of information
I'm
to
sorry.
digest.
I'm sorry, I'm
and
throwing it out.
we'll probably
I
get
don't
to
know.
talk about it maybe in another time. But
Yeah, I'm
good
trying to
stuff. I
condense
just want to
this
try to
down.
real quick just to let everybody know, okay, this is what this is. Because that guy, you know, when the article you mentioned, yeah, adoption rocks. I'm like, I kind of like that name, and I'm like, oh, this is not good. Okay.
No,
Sorry.
it's evil, and I don't use that word lightly, because I'm not a religious person, so I don't use that word lightly. But yeah, it's one of it is human trafficking, and the story's already hit big, but when it really hits big, it's going to, heads are probably going to roll. I imagine a lot of people are going to be held accountable in this state. People are just saying, okay, great. Well, we still sell people here in Alabama. It's really embarrassing, especially since we are the state of George Wallace, to know that this is going on. And people from other areas of the country, they do know that you can go to Alabama and you can buy a baby real fast. They know that. That's something they know. There's a couple of states you can do that in: Alabama, Arkansas, Utah. Also,
so this is
Hawaii.
something that's big in the South, then.
Correct. They're churning out poor white, what they consider poor
What
white
a
trash.
culture we have down here in the South. It's deeper than people realize.
Yep, it is. So, and I'm sorry if that sounded scattered, but there's so much I could tell you, and so many things that I could just share and relate. If you want to, some sites, there are several sites you can go to: Exposing the Dark Side of Adoption, poundpuppylegacy.org, poundpuppylegacy.org. If you want to get a lot of numbers and facts there. If you want to see something from the 1998, and it gives examples of how this evolved into how secretive it is today and how insidious. No one knows. Now they think adoption's a beautiful thing. They don't want to think it's like the mid-century, but it is. It's just very, very, very passive, aggressive. It's not overtly tie you down to a table and take your child. It's stalk you. This is an article from the chicagoreader.com. It's back in the archives, Babies Wanted, and it has a whole list of private ads that were taken out in newspapers back when newspapers were a thing, couples advertising for babies. And it also lists some numbers of what children went for back then. And remember, inflation, and they go for more now. So also, if you really want to get creeped out after everything I just told you, go to Independent Adoption Center and just read that page and look what it says down at the bottom, where it says, if you are pregnant. It at first it covers how much does adoption cost, and it says adoptions cost from $0 to $50,000, and then it goes on to give you more numbers and more scenarios, and then it says if you are placing a baby up for adoption, it doesn't cost any money. You can get free pregnancy counseling. It tells you to click on now to check with a counselor. So if you click on that to check with a counselor, what's going to come up? Well, there it says email box, and it says I am pregnant or parenting, and then it goes down. It said interested in adopting. Here's where it gets creepy. My partner/child is pregnant. So this is where they're actually calling on family, partners, and friends to basically submit questioning for women. And that happens a lot, especially with underage girls. Parents still do this today. It's not supposed to be legal, but it is legal. Parents will sign over a girl's child. It happened to my cousin. I can promise you it's still happening.
Yeah, that you mentioned, I mean, you say the word trafficking, I think, gosh, that's such a harsh word, but you know, you mentioned the term like intersectionality earlier, like the understanding of where women are in society. You can see how people, and definitely with a difference in class, can be coerced and say, this is my best option, even when it's not. Like, how could it be somebody's decision when there's like this financial anvil for people's heads?
Well,
and a societal anvil too. I mean, the way they anti-abortion people are going, it's like, you have to have this kid or else, and then someone's going to help you and take care of you. It's going to be all good.
And I'm really glad that you brought that up, because the point needs to be made that none of these women, that 97% of adoptions are coerced. How are they mainly coerced? If it's not underage, they're coerced, or an underage and or abusive partner, like what Kimberly experienced. It's financial, it's socioeconomic. It is the fact that wage disparity and the pay gap and all that is a very real thing, especially for women. And you have to be so poor before you can get Medicaid. You can get Medicaid if you're pregnant, and if you have, but if you're underinsured, that's a problem. A lot of this is financial distress. They are under duress physically, but there's a lot of financial stuff that's coming into play. None of all the mothers that I've spoken with, that I've seen, would never even have considered it if they hadn't have been poor, if they have not been strapped for money. I mean, just basic resources. If they hadn't have had, if they, a lot of the people didn't hardly qualified for Medicaid, which is ridiculous, because you're supposed to qualify for that if you're pregnant. But there are things about our healthcare system that are really
there's like the Obamacare Republican state, so we can't take federal money for this.
Exactly.
Poor kind of aspect.
Exactly. So
the poor tend to vote for them, oddly, but anyway.
I know, and they're the ones who are trafficking, basically supporting this. But yeah, so that point needs to be made, that if it was not a complete and total lack of resources, that is something that none of these women would have ever considered. Ever, ever, ever. The other two variables that really come into play are the parents for underage girls and abusive partners.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure happening there. I feel like we talked about this forever. We're getting close to the end of the hour. I cannot believe this time. Of course, the time always flies, because time flies when you're having fun or talking about horrible people. How did you come up with the name Vesper Wolf?
Oh, that was my cat's name, my deceased cat's name. And she passed a couple years ago, and I had her for most of my life, and she was my familiar. And so I that's how I came up with the name Vesper Wolf. I always loved the name Vesper. I read a series when I was a little girl, I read a book series about a girl named Vesper who used to go on these wild adventures. So I love that name. And then one of my favorite authors, the reason I went to grad school, was basically Virginia Woolf. So I gave her Virginia Woolf's last name. So that's how I came up with the name Vesper.
Nice connection.
Yeah,
someone who's still kind of, it was just a train wreck of a personal 6 months, where we had an old cat who died, and we expected he was going to die, but we had another cat, and he was 12, and we thought, we're good. And then almost immediately after his brother died, he started getting sick. And about 6 months later, we had to put him to sleep. And it just was to go, because we always had cats. My wife and I have been together 13 years, and we've never not had cats. And it was just, okay, we're not going to have cats for a while. And 5 weeks later, we have 2 cats. That's just
that's the way it works. They always find you.
Stalking kitties on the kitty adoption thing is probably maybe slightly nicer, but we found them, found them online, and it's been very, very lovely. So tell me about, you have it looks like a key tattoo in your arm. What's the story there?
Oh, well, I love tattoos. All my tattoos are very unique, and I've designed most of them myself. They're very classy. I'm proud of them. This is basically designed after the key. When I lived in Chattanooga, one of the houses I lived in 3 Victorians. I've lived in 3 Victorians before, and my bedroom actually locked with a key like this. We used the old skeleton keys. So that's for that house, because I love that house. It was 955 Vine Street. It was right down from the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, and it was beautiful. It was a very magical area. So Chattanooga is a very beautiful town. You've been there. So yeah.
Although I usually go to my in-laws, and they live at Harrison, which is 30 minutes away.
Oh,
so it's always we need a special excuse to just go to Chattanooga, because it's really come up as Nashville has. It was run down for a while, and then they really revitalized. Really nice aquarium in Chattanooga.
Have you been to the Chattanooga Choo-Choo, the Choo-Choo?
I haven't been there.
Oh, you need to go to the Chattanooga Choo-Choo. It's famous. Chattanooga Choo-Choo.
Got to be more touristy.
Yeah. I used to hang out at that bar in college, Chattanooga Choo Choo Bar, and they have one of those gypsy mannequin women. That they do the cards. It's kind of you put the quarters in, and
Okay.
it's one of those old box. What do they call them? Box mannequins. A gypsy fortune teller, and it's eerie because she looks so lifelike, and in the
It's like,
box is like as
didn't
tall
quite
as a
like
door.
Zoltan in the movie
Yeah,
Big, right?
yeah. They have one of those there. Her name's Estrella, and she'll tell your fortune. She'll print you out your fortune if you put in 2 quarters. And it's a beautiful train station. It's beautiful.
A lot of cool history there. So where can people find you, if they want to read your stuff on your blog or follow you on Twitter, Facebook, and of course your show?
Well, my channel is Southern Belle Atheism, and that's on YouTube. And it's just Southern Belle Atheism. My personal Twitter is @VesperWolf, and 2 O's like Virginia. And my Southern Belle Atheism Twitter is Belles of Atheism, just Belles of Atheism. And I'm on Facebook under my name, Amber Geislinger. I don't think a lot of people ever look on Facebook hardly anymore, though. And my blog is it's kind of a separate entity, but I did finally link it to my Twitter. But my blog is just The Burning Times of Vesper Wolf, and it's just Vesper Wolf at WordPress, or vesperwolf.wordpress.com, whatever that site is. So it's just a WordPress blog.
Okay, we'll get all those links on there. And before we call it a night, is there anything else that we didn't cover that you want to talk about?
I am an author. I guess I should give that out. I wrote a book, Lovecraft's Daughter. Find that on Amazon.
That's cool.
I always forget about that. And yeah, I was sorry if the adoption thing sounded so disjointed, but there's so much I could say. We could do like hours on that. In fact, I'm about to start doing some programs on that on my channel.
Well, it's an important subject, and even though we talked about some of the surface things that people get upset about that don't seem to matter that much, it always seems like actually there's a show, Mythicist Milwaukee, and they had a guy on there who was basically involved in like lawsuits about molestation in the Catholic Church and like the state of Wisconsin, and it's just those stories just scare the crap out of you. And then you hear about the adoption stuff, and you go, "My nephews are growing up Catholic, and my parents are actually in a Catholic. Why? They don't know. They cannot know any of this stuff. Not possible."
They probably don't. It's probably kept very hush hush, unless they're looking for a kid. So.
No. Well, it's the amazing compartmentalization of the show. So let me tell a quick story, and then we'll call it a night. Last weekend, I got to meet one of my Patreons, Teody, who goes by the civilian name None of Your Damn Business, joined my birthday celebration. And while he claimed much skill in the ancient video game Dig Dug, my skeptic brain asked that he prove it. He did not prove it. I defeated him, but I will accept a rematch and possibly another beer. And I very much appreciate the fact that he came to visit, because he's a guy that lives in Atlanta. I met him at a conference in North Carolina, and we hadn't met again since. So we got to actually meet in person, which was nice. And he added to his donation to my Patreon page, which is patreon.com/Zachrilege. It's right there in front of you. And if you're listening, ZACHRILEGE. So you can follow me on Twitter, like my Zachrilege Cast page on Facebook, and send all hate mail to zachrilege.cast@gmail.com. I'd like to thank Amber for being on tonight and for all the chat and the good beer. Yeah, I'll be coming to Birmingham to pick some of that up soon. So stay safe, everybody. And if you need to chat, I'm available. If you're an atheist and feel alone, you are not alone. Reach out, let's chat, and get that human connectiveness that keeps people coming back every Sunday. Let's say stay skeptical, and good night.